Hello, everyone. Good evening. Thank you for attending the town hall meeting this evening. I want to go ahead and get started, and thank you all for being here and interested in the town services and what we provide. And the moderator for the evening is going to be Lou Harvey, and I'll send it over to Lou.
Thank everybody for being here. Before we get started with anything, let's pray. Kind gracious Heavenly Father, thank you for allowing us all to be gathered in this building tonight. Be with each and every one of us that are here. Help us to open our mind and hearts and listen to what's going on. Help us to be able to understand, to ask questions in a timely and orderly fashion, and learn something from the whole aspects of this meeting. In your name we pray. Amen. I am the moderator. They asked me to come do this. I told them I would. I look forward to having a very good meeting with everybody here.
Please use the microphone. I'm sorry. I'm hard of hearing and I'm having trouble hearing.
No problem, dear. I'll be glad to.
Thank you.
So before we get into this part of it, can you get it now?
Yes,
sir. I'm going to let everybody introduce themselves and who they represent first.
Good evening, my name is Mike Tolson. I'm with Mackay Associates. We are working with the town on a couple of grant-funded asset inventory assessment projects and are in the midst of preparing our reports on those. So I'm here to talk about those related items tonight as it pertains to the questions that have been posed.
My name is Kevin Varnell, and I'm with Stocks Engineering, and we are the on-call engineer for the town.
Hello everyone, I'm Anna Gurney. I'm here to represent the state with the Department of Environmental Quality.
Good evening, I'm Libby Jenkins and I'm with Envirolink.
Good evening, I'm Dave Strum. I'm also with Envirolink.
Hello, my name is Jay Kim, and I'm with the town Spring Hope.
Okay. If you have a cell phone, please cut it off. We'll put it on silent. We need to be able to hear what everybody's going to say and everybody be able to understand what's going on. So please put it on silent. If you have to answer a call, I'd like you to just get up, step out, answer it outside. Everybody good with that? Okay. We'll read through a list of prepared ground rules. Only one speaker at a time, please, and can be recognized by myself. Each speaker will have 2 minutes to address the panel to give others time to participate. Time will be enforced. We have a couple of ladies in here with some flags. They're going to wave at us. Raise your hand to signify that you would like to ask a question. Once we get through the original questions that we're going to start with, have no side conversations. We want everybody to be able to hear and understand what's going on from everybody else that's speaking. Be respectful of others' opinions. We all have one, so we'll just kind of be respectful of each one. We have, before I get too far on, we have some outstanding guests in our audience. We have County Commissioner sitting back there, Mr. Dan Coleman. We have our Senator, Ms. Lisa Barnes, our Representative, Mr. Gary Hart.
And this is another Commissioner, Sue Lee.
Ms. Sue Lee. Good to see you, Sue. Did I miss anybody? There? Mr. Harrington? Okay. All right. Thank you, sir. They're here to listen, and if you'd like to speak to them afterwards, or if they'd like to say something at the end, we'll give them the opportunity to speak. So we're starting with some pre-questions that came in. These came from Miss Nancy Perry. Are you here? Everybody see Miss Nancy?
Hello.
What steps does Envirolink take to find and repair leaks before they become major breaks? That is an Envirolink answer.
Thank you for attending. It's great to see so many citizens here tonight to express their interest in the water system, and so we appreciate your question and all of you for showing up tonight. So the steps Envirolink takes is through monitoring the water system. The water system is monitored daily. We monitor how much water the wells produce, pressure of the wells. We also monitor the tank level. If any of those are outside normal operating position, we immediately dispatch crews to survey the entire town to try to locate and repair leaks as soon as possible. If we're unable to locate leaks and the system continues to show abnormal, we have agencies that we work with all the time, and they actually have leak detection equipment, which is actually through sound. So they can hook up to fire hydrants and put probes in the ground and actually locate leaks that you can't see on the surface through sound. It's pretty interesting on how they can do that. That's some of the ways we try to locate leaks as fast as possible. Unfortunately, sometimes leaks happen very rapidly. The one specifically that put the town out of water, there was no leak detected at 4 o'clock when the technicians were here. We believe it happened sometime between 7 and 8 o'clock at night. So that's how rapidly water leaks can happen. So that's how we monitor for water leaks.
A second question from Ms. Nancy. Why can't some type of wireless alarm be placed on the tower and/or tanks to notify the community of low pressure value issues on the tower?
That's another great question, Nancy. So thanks for asking. There's a system called a SCADA system, which stands for Supervisory Control and Data Acquisition System, which is nothing more than a fancy name for a computer system that can monitor the water system. Envirolink has actually have an initiative for this type of system since 2011, and we actually own some of the infrastructure for this type of system. The system has to be specifically designed for every water system, which is currently in the process for Spring Hope. We hope the design will be completed as soon as the first of next month. Once it is completed, we will present it to the town, and I'm sure they will incorporate this type of technology into the water system. But the capabilities of this type of system include monitoring the exact water level at the tower, the water tank. It can control the wells, so as water demand increases, the system will turn on more wells. If water demand decreases, it will turn off appropriate wells. It would also monitor pressure in the system, and it would also give some remote controls of the wells and monitoring system. So the system is in the works, and like I said, we hope that the design will be finished next month, and the technology will be incorporated into Springfield's water system.
Question number 3. What do water leaks and water main breaks cost our town each year? And is the budget projection of $70,000 enough?
So right now, the cost for labor when it comes to repairs is zero. It's part of the contract with Envirolink, our contractor. Again, if they're working on new systems, anything where we're incorporating, maybe adding new lines, we do have to pay an hourly labor rate for those who are doing the work. But again, if it's maintaining and repairing our current systems that we have, the labor cost is zero. We do have to pay for parts and supplies. And so some data, for example, for this fiscal year, between parts and supplies was a total of $2,358.25. But that doesn't include when it comes to street repairs as well too, if they have to, if we have to repair for asphalt. So for the water leak that we had on East Nash Street, 64 alternate was $4,255 for the asphalt repair. Again, when it comes to the budget projection, the budget for the water and sewer enterprise is heavily dictated by potential revenues that we generate from that. And so for the last several years, we had projected around $60,000 to $70,000 for repair costs in our budget. And so for this fiscal year, we do have, I believe, $70,000 for repairs under the water and sewer enterprise fund.
Question number 4. How do we create a map of the town's water system, lines and valves? Can't you use, I assume you meant the GIS system for this? And that's mine.
Thank you. Again, Mike Tolson with Mackay Associates out of Rocky Mount. We are currently working on a,
Excuse me.
Sorry about that. Again, Mike Tolson with Mackay Associates. We are currently working on a online GIS version of the town's water distribution and sewer collection system. That is based heavily on previous maps that the town has had in their archives that we have digitized and have incorporated into that GIS, but we have also gone through the town. You may have seen trucks from our surveyors going around and painting little pink dots on manholes and on fire hydrants and valves. We have located through survey accuracy, high accuracy survey grade GPS equipment, every valve, hydrant, meter, clean out, and manhole in town. So we are currently working on having that. We've got the draft ready to be submitted to the town. We've been working on it for about the past 4 or 5 months and should have it ready to present and train the town on town staff and the Envirolink staff that will be using it so that it can be readily available for them to use to find sizes and previous history on different assets in the town system. But should have that in the next few months, should have that live with everybody being able to access it through certain credentials that will be made available to the public to view that data when it's available.
You good? Okay. Tara Himmelwright? Is that how you spell that?
No,
okay.
Himmelwright.
One more time.
Himmelwright.
Himmelwright. Thank you. So I have a question here. It's, do we have a dedicated team with Envirolink that services just Spring Hope? That's an Envirolink.
Well, I'm just going to stick to Tara. How's that?
That'll work.
Okay. The answer is yes. We have several employees that are unique to Spring Hope. One of them we call a resident employee. They don't necessarily live in Spring Hope, but they work in Spring Hope every day, and it's the only area that they do work in. We also follow a first responder model, so that particular employee would respond to all calls, kind of first responder, and then after he assesses the situation, he would call in specialized teams that are needed to deal with whatever situation that the town is experiencing. We also have a dedicated water and wastewater operator dedicated to Spring Hope, and they operate obviously the water and wastewater system. That individual has to be certified by the state of North Carolina. Anybody can't operate a water and wastewater system. It is mandatory that that person hold a certification for the water and wastewater system specific to Spring Hope at the level that is issued by the state of North Carolina. So we do have, employees that are dedicated to Spring Hope, and we also have specialized teams that we bring in based on, situations that are going on in Spring Hope.
What is the condition of our wells, the recovery rate, lifespan? Do we need to be planning for a new well, and has that been budgeted? Kevin, I think that's
me. Again, my name is Kevin Barnell with Stocks Engineering, and currently the town has 5 wells that are operational, and they range in yield from around 40 gallons a minute to 150 gallons a minute. Can you hear? Is it microphone? The exact age of some of these wells are unknown, but we do know they were operational in 1992 as far as the original well itself. Now the mechanics and operational side of it are things that they are mechanical items that do fail. So they are replaced whenever they're needed, and typically they last around 20 to 30 years depending on the actual service life of each one of those. But they're replaced every time they need to be replaced or every time something does break. So really of the original wells that are here, the only thing that is original to that well is probably the actual hole in the ground that the water's coming out of. And some of them do have well houses, so the well houses were probably originally built when the well was originally constructed as well. As far as planning for new wells, the town has been looking for many years for new well locations. We've identified several locations. One of the ones that we kind of concentrated on right here recently has been an old well that was actually abandoned back in the mid-2000s due to a failed casing on that well. We've gone through, I guess, several studies and things with NW Pool. We actually sent a camera down that line to find out exactly where that casing had failed, what was kind of going on with that well. We've also had multiple conversations with the Division of Environmental Quality Public Water Supply on whether we could bring that well back online. The reason we like an existing well is because we know a lot about that well. One, we know what the water supply was when it was taken offline. We know the depth of it. We know the condition of it. Anytime we go looking for a new well site, we always run the risk of not finding water. So we certainly could drill just like any other well and get 25 gallons a minute, which is not what we want for a town water supply. So anytime we have an existing well that we have a lot of data on, we try to use that as much as we can. So that's why we've concentrated on that. And again, we have already contracted with NW Pool to do a lot of work for that well. And we're continuing to move forward with that process of trying to get that well back online.
What is the maintenance schedule? Do they check the towers weekly or monthly? That could be the town or Envirolink, and I think you kind of alluded to that a while ago.
Okay, Envirolink doesn't perform any per se maintenance on the tower. We're not certified to climb the tower or certified to work at that type of height. Most of the time we do visual inspections, like I said in question 1. We visually inspect the tower to determine what the level in the tower is and what the pressure is. So it's mainly just visual inspections. We do have some specialized gauges and that kind of stuff on the tower that help us determine the tank level, and we assist the maintenance contractor during isolation and that kind of stuff. But I'll let Jay elaborate on the maintenance agreement with the tower specifically.
So we contract with Suez. They were formerly known as Utility Services, and they do inspections annually. Now, we do have 2 towers in town, and we switch off with what's done one year and the next. So typically, again, every other year you do an inspection on one tower, and then the next year we typically do a wash where they clean out the tower. So again, the towers are inspected annually. When we did recently have some low pressure issues where there wasn't a leak detected, we did contact our contractor, and they did come out as an emergency to check the gauge and indicator on the tower at Grant Street. They didn't find anything wrong with it, but they did make some slight modifications to try to get the pulley system to work better. But when they did check it, it was functioning, and there weren't any issues with it. They just tried to slightly modify it.
Just to elaborate just a few things. The maintenance contract with the tanks, they do visual inspection, washout, just like they said. But they also do sandblast it, paint it, inspect it. Pretty much from cradle to grave, they handle the maintenance concerns of the tank. So it's a pretty elaborate program. And they paint it, like I said, sandblast it according to the schedules identified by the industry in the state.
Back to Miss Nancy. What would happen if the town had a fire and we had no access to water? Does Springhook have a pumper truck? That's kind of a fire-related question, but okay.
Before we get to that question, Tara, did you have any follow-up or questions or any statements you wanted to say? I wanted to give everybody the opportunity who had submitted the questions to also, if you had any follow-ups or not. Did you have anything at this time right now? Okay. So again, the next question was yes. So we do have a mutual aid agreement with all of our surrounding rural departments and municipal departments. And typically they'll, in a situation like that with an emergency, they would bring drop tanks, and then they would try to find the nearest water points. And so the closest one that we have in town is actually off of Barbie Street, and the pond adjacent to it is what supplies an emergency water source for a potential fire that would happen in town if we were to lose access to water pressure in the lines.
Another question from Mr. Terra. Is the town or the school penalized or fined in any way when the school has to close due to water issues?
And before I answer that, I want to ask Nancy again, that had asked that question. Do you have any follow-up to that?
Do we have a bumper truck, or do they have to bring us water?
The Spring Oak Fire Department, volunteer fire department, does have a pumper truck.
Okay.
Yeah. And so going to question 9, the simple answer is no. There are no penalties or fines for when we have water issues and the school has to close. Do you have a follow-up or any
What
comment?
about the commercial businesses that are forced to close when we have these situations?
Unfortunately, when we do have emergencies and we do lose potential water pressure, for some of the businesses that are dependent on that, they do have to shut down and temporarily close services during that time period, yes.
Okay. Miss Sally Chapman. Okay, her question is there any way possible that the state or anyone else would allow our town's water department to send water into the homes with any type of carcinogens agent present? Now, we have somebody from the state down for that.
I do, and I talk really loud, but if somebody wants to give me a
I'm gonna
microphone,
I'll be glad to.
do that as well. Thank you, sir. Okay, well, the short answer is that obviously our division is all about compliance. That's what we're there for. So we follow federal and state standards for contaminants, and your town has not only met those standards, but in many of the cases has the testing has come back what's called non-detect. So certain chemicals are not even present, which according to our chief public water supply person, who is an amazing and very knowledgeable, has been in this business for a very long time, explains that when you look across the country, it's almost unheard of. He has given a lot more detail, and what I would like to do, Mr. Kim, if that would be possible, is I would like to possibly put that into a format that then could be shared, whether it's online or I can email them out, or you can email me for them, and I can give you a whole lot more detail. It does get pretty technical. It's what I do all day, is I take very scientific and engineering information and I try to make it understandable for the regular folks, including myself. So if any of you want more information about what's in your water, but I will tell you that I did a lot of digging before I came here and asking the right people, how clean is your water based on standards. And they are meeting both EPA and state regulatory standards. I've also provided and can provide it to anybody that would like any of the water quality testing. We can put it online. I'll do everything I can to make it as available to you all as possible.
Thank you. Mr. Tony Jeffers. Okay. Tony's got several questions here. It looks like Envirolink's probably going to be answering the first 3. Where are the water samples taken and how is that determined?
Well, thanks, Tony, for being here and answering these questions. These are great questions. Water samples are really taken through the entire process. So there's a lot of different types of water samples that are taken. I believe there's over 200 contaminations that are tested for the water system. Like it was just mentioned, almost all of them are zero or non-detect. And so the water is sampled as soon as it comes out of the ground at the well. There's certain samples that are pulled at each and every well. There's samples that are pulled out in the community, the distribution system, and there's actually samples that are required to be pulled in your guys' house. I don't know if anybody here that's participated in those, but they are required to be pulled in the houses. So the locations are set up by the state, and the water system is activated. There's sample locations that we have to do sampling plans that are sent to the state and approved by the state.
The question right behind that is who takes the samples, and is another party there to witness the process?
So the person that takes the samples is the ORC, which stands for Operator Responsible in Charge, which is a term that was created by the state. And it's, like I said previously, it's the guy that is certified in the appropriate level for Spring Hope. And the certification is issued by the state of North Carolina. So they're certified in the water operations. So that's the person who is required to take the samples. There's not really anyone there to witness the sample per se. He collects it based on his certifications. From there's a chain of custody that's done that tracks the sample all the way to the state certified laboratory, which they would perform the analysis of the sample. And then the results that the state certified lab gets is sent directly to the state. It's not sent through Envirolink or sent to the town, through the town to get to the state. It's sent directly to the state, and it's also sent to the owner of the system.
Is there a written procedure to follow while taking the samples?
Absolutely. I mean, a water sample sounds relatively simple, right? You're putting water into a collection container and sending it to the state. It sounds very simple, but it is a very complicated process. There's procedures on, exactly how to take a sample. Technicians have to disinfect their hands. They have to wear gloves. It gets down to the point of how you hold a bottle in relationship to the cap of the bottle. As well as our procedures, the lab has procedures for each type of sample. And since Envirolink performs some analysis, we actually have to be certified by the state every year, where the state would send what we call a blank sample. They'll send a sample to us, and they know the readings that the sample should be. We don't. So we'll do the analysis on the sample and send our results to the state. They'll take what we recorded and what the known conditions of the sample was, and if they match, they certify us every year. And so Envirolink has been certified every year since the program started. We've never not been certified.
The next three questions are going to be for Mike, and they're pretty short, so I'm going to read through all of them. How many feet of water line are in the system? How many valves are in the system? And how many of the valves function correctly?
Okay, so as far as the number of how many feet of water line in the system, you have to wrap your head around the fact that there's almost 7 miles of water line in the ground in this town. You have a well that is just outside of what you would call just outside of town, that is transmission line that's included in that number, but there's 33,000 feet or greater than 33,000 feet. Now, my numbers are based on my graphical representation on the GIS that we pulled together. Don't quote me on that exact number. We haven't dug them up and measured them all per se, but that is a rough guide as to how much water is in the ground, how many miles of water line are in the ground, how many feet of water line are in the ground. To answer the next one, how many valves are in the system, during our survey and as-built of the water system, we counted 194 water valves, or at least water valve boxes with valve covers. 194 in town is about the number you would expect with that many miles of main in the ground in rough order. And how many valves function correctly? Honestly, we haven't put a wrench on every one of them and turned them and tried to exercise every valve, but I would say that for a system this size, with this age of a system, you could expect that between 60 and 70% of them function correctly, and there would be some issue not able to get full closeout, or possibly can't get the valve wrench on the nut to turn the valve, or some dysfunction of the valve in about 30 to 35% of them. So with that, there's quite a few that need some attention, but do you know which ones those are? I can't walk to one and tell you whether it's functioning properly or not unless I've just put a valve wrench on it and tried to stop the line. So yeah, there's those. Any more questions?
Well, the only thing I would ask then, the way it sounds to me, is that you're putting a map together now for the town. So if there's a break right here at this place, you don't really know what valves that need to be turned off to shut it down, to take that break and keep it in a small area so that the town's not affected. Like an emergency, when you come running out here, do you have an idea what valves to go to shut down to keep the leak as small as possible that people are affected? Or you don't know until you put a wrench on it?
Well, typically you start right at the valves that are closest to the break, and you work outward in blocks by the valves that you have, and you use that map to walk you to the valves to try.
So you do have a map, they have a map?
Yes, sir. They've always had a map, and this one is just an online version of that map that we are putting together for.
It makes me nervous when you call it archives. You said it's an archive map before.
I apologize. That's just my way of saying it's the paper copies that we've digitized, and they're all online. And digitized, ready to be reproduced if needed, but they'll be on this online GIS map we are putting together of the assets in the system. Does that answer your question? Okay.
Yeah.
And one more question from Tony. Is there a maintenance program for the water system? If so, are there records to show the maintenance that was done?
Okay, so Envirolink operates on, it's called a CMMS system, which stands for Computerized Maintenance Management System. And we've pretty much always had this type of system. Over the last few years, we've upgraded the system to a more robust version of it. But we use it for everything, whether we're fixing a pump, whether we're flushing a hydrant, whether we're repairing a water line, all the way down to collecting a water sample, even down to cutting grass. We use the CMMS system. That's how our technicians know what to do, and that's how they get their work assignments. And that system records, who did the job, what they did, any record associated with the maintenance of the asset, like I said, all the way down to cutting grass.
Tony, any follow-up for you?
Well, I mean, the simple process I ask is just like the valves. There's no maintenance on the valves. You guys don't go out arbitrarily and check valves and make sure they do function. I don't hear that because the young man said that you didn't know which ones work, some of them don't. You don't know until you put a wrench on it. So that kind of maintenance to me needs to be done. I mean, so your system can function, you can use your system. And I don't think we have that in stock. I mean, you got a computer that tells you certain things, it sounds like, but I don't see physically going out there and doing things of that nature.
I mean, we periodically check valves and exercise them to make sure they work, but have we done it for the entire system? No.
Okay, that brings us to the end of the questions that were mailed in. So now we will start by the group that is here. Anybody that would like to ask a question or make a comment, you raise your hand and you can come forward to I'm going to start back here with the gentleman who raised his hand at the back. You'll come, name and address and your question.
Name's Matthew Gordy, I'm at 312 Oak Avenue. Your folks came by the other day and dropped off a blank door knocker on my door. That to me is a very basic identifier of what the problem is. Why is your folks not writing anything on these knockers and just leave them on their doors?
I'm not sure. Where can I see that?
I mean, it's, there you go, completely blank. I mean, I could have had a leak in the house, I could have had all kind of problems, and that could have told me what was going on. So that kind of bothers me that you have a guy running around just dropping off door knockers.
What was your address again, sir?
312 Oak Avenue. And while you're working on that, on the water valve issue, most manufacturers for water valves require those things to be exercised at least once a year. That's how you maintain them. I've worked in 24 towns that do this. I work at CI, I work in a very similar industry he does. Why aren't you guys going out there once a year and exercising these valves to make sure they stay maintained and they can get replaced on a timely manner if they need to be?
Well, we do exercise the valves, but we can't, due to the age of the system, we can't just go isolate valves and create water outages and possibly burst pipes.
I mean, all you gotta do is just cut it on, cut it off, back and forth. That's all you do as far as exercising goes.
And we do something, we do that.
Do you have records on that?
It's through our maintenance system.
Okay, so those records gonna be able to provide it to us, because I'm very curious how this system is maintained.
Sure, well, we can provide the town.
Yeah, that's fine. I mean, as long as the town's getting a full set of records that I can go view if I'd like to.
Sure, it'll be up to the town.
Okay, answers my questions.
Okay, thank you. Next.
Jason Himmelwright, 213 East Railroad Street. One of my main concerns is all the new home building and contract construction like the Bojangles coming in. Has there been any studies to see how any of these new homes, this will affect the current aging water system?
So the answer to your question is yes. So before any site is, I guess, water main is extended into a new subdivision or for the Bojangle site itself, the water lines are extended in, we actually have to obtain a permit from DEQ for those water lines and that water system. Along with that is a model that has to be done that's based on the existing pressures and flows of the system to show that the new system can still maintain the pressures that they're required to maintain without causing a vacuum in the rest of the system. So there are a lot of things that are monitored. Really, most of that is through permitting through the state, and they're making sure that there, one, is enough water supply in the wells, enough water storage in the tanks, and then also enough pressure in the system to maintain the new development.
My other question is there a plan to actually just start systematically replacing the old system? I'm sure it's going to be very expensive. I'm sure it's going to be many tax dollars. I mean, to me, just fixing it, I mean, we just had low water this evening for about an hour. Are we going to actually, I feel like we're being checkers players instead of chess players. We're just dealing with the very next problem that's handed to us instead of looking 5 moves ahead of us.
So I'll try and answer and pose an answer to that question. So as part of the asset inventory assessment project that we are working on for the water and the sewer system, there is a capital improvement plan that we developed that is basically recommendations to the town based on the condition of the system as to what we would recommend for replacement, rehabilitation of sewer and or water, depending on which utility we're writing the report for, and so that we can make, so that the town can better use the money they have for capital investment to replace portions of the system, and with that comes cost estimates, and then as the end of that is a rate study to discuss what rates would have to be in the town to recoup whatever that investment needs to be, or making recommendations as to whether or not the town should seek grant funding or long-term debt loans to be able to afford them without having to raise water rates so high that, you know, it becomes cost prohibitive. I will tell you that replacement of water mains in a system is a very intense process. I'm working on another town that we've gotten funding for through the CDBG program through the state, that's federal money, and it's $2 million worth of grant money to do that. And we're only able to replace about 1/3 of the mains in their town, and they are 1/3 the size of this town. And so just as a guide, it's a very expensive endeavor. It's 4 or 5 years in the making as far as from the time you decide what the project is, applying for the funding, getting the funding. It's a very competitive process, and then turning around and actually turning that into a project where there is dirt being moved and lines being put in the ground. You may be 5 to 7 years from A to B, and that's why you continually, work these projects and try and push for funding and those sorts of things.
Thank you all very much.
Who's next?
Riley Hemorrhoid, 213 East Railroad Street. Like he said, if the town does start with a new water system, or if they keep the old system, does the town plan on doing anything to limit hands-on use and do more of a mechanical, where you can sit from behind a desk and watch over the entire town at once, and you know immediately where the breakage is, what to close, what to stop, or even like exercising the valves? Is there a way you can make it to where no one has to go out there every year? You can just systematically do it. You can push a couple buttons, and it exercises the whole system at once.
I like where you hit that. Engineering firm, if you can help me figure that one out, I'd love it. So to put it bluntly, yes, there is a type of system. It's often called, you see it a lot on electric type distribution equipment, where they can cut your power off remotely from the power. With a water system, it's a little bit more difficult because you have a mechanical device that you have to use to valve off water and turn valves, and hard to do that with electrical impulse. And there are some smart metering options and some automated reading devices that are very cost intensive, that could be added on. And I would say that the big step would be to get replacement of older parts of the system for more reliable distribution main in the ground. Old-fashioned, if you will, but still use those kinds of things. And most technology that you put in for new meters, for new valves and things like that is beginning to be more scalable, so that you could add and scale up to that sort of technology. But I can tell you that it's incredibly expensive, and it's highly specialized, and for a town this size, it would be just astronomical in cost. I don't know those numbers, and we could try to run them. The automated meter reading would be a step in the right direction for meter reads in town. And what you do is put those in, and you put in scalable meters that eventually could become, Wi-Fi on the buildings that reads out, and it can notify you of potential leaks and things like that. We're just not there with this town system right now. Now, exercising the valves, man, that'd be a great one. I would love to see that happen. But you also run the risk of every time you put a wrench, a valve wrench or a valve key on a valve, you are running the risk of breaking that stem and possibly locking that valve open or breaking it shut. And if that's the case, then you have to go and dig it down. And automatic valve turners and things like that are, they'd be great, but I haven't seen that technology get very widespread yet. So. But that's a great idea.
I'm not as smart as most people that work in the industry. It's just throwing ideas.
No, it's a great idea.
My second question is, what is the town planning on doing? Like, the new generation of people moving into Spring Hope, coming from Raleigh or Wilson or some of these bigger towns that want to either settle down in a smaller home or want to get away from the bigger cities. Is the town planning on fixing these issues faster or within the next 5 to 10 years? So this new wave of people, because I'm 15, I'm one of the new waves of people that will come in and buy a home, and it'll be my first house that I buy on my own. What is the town planning on doing for towns or houses that get built, or people that move in where it's from Raleigh, people are starting to move in and there's more and more people? Is the town planning on fixing these problems sooner, or is it going to be something that my kids are going to have to deal with the water system?
I'm going to let Jay
we have to know exactly which items are things we like to tackle or do first. And the whole process and planning is that we apply for the Aia Grant. Again, this grant program, I believe, started in 2015. I believe was the original date of that program. We had applied for that grant multiple years and were not awarded. Again, it's a competitive grant program. But we were awarded in 2019. That was just the first step. And part of that step is to find out, again, updating our system infrastructure, find out what needs to be tackled, what options we have. That's where we consult with the engineers on which ones we can go after, how we're going to fund it. It's part of the process, but yes, we're all making steps towards trying to repair our infrastructure.
Those are all my questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Good questions. Anybody else? Yes, ma'am.
Charlene Battle, 7452 Mac Lane. My question is, I'm just not understanding. You indicated that we had 5 working wells and that you were looking at maybe reopening a closed one. What was wrong with it that it got closed?
So it has taken us a while to try to figure that out. One of the things that we had issues with was numbering on the wells. So if you go back and look, when the original wells were permitted, they actually changed numbers at some point. So we and DWQ struggled, I guess, with trying to figure out which well it was. So we've now isolated which well it actually is. And what we have found out is the casing was leaking around the side and allowing contaminated water from the ground, from the top, to be able to get into the well system. So the way a well is kind of designed is there's a casing that is driven down very deep from the top of the surface. Some of them go 80 feet, some of them go all the way to bedrock. And so that casing seals off the top water that's more contaminated from getting into the well itself. So in this case, what happened when we put the video camera down into the well is we saw around 80 gallons a minute is coming in around the well casing from the top. So water's coming in from the top of the ground and running down the well casing and going into the well. So what happened was that one actually came back contaminated multiple times. And instead of fixing it, the town had plenty of water supply at the time. And again, we still have water supply today. And ultimately they decided for some reason to just cut that well off and not fix it. So today technology is a little better than it was then. So we're able to do a few more things. And again, a video camera, being able to see into a well is huge for us to be able to tell what's going on and how to fix it. So one of those, I guess, a great technology was being able to actually pump down the well, send the video camera in. We're able to see exactly what the issue is. And the solution for that is we're going to take a casing on the inside, a smaller casing, and send it further down into the well and then regrout the well back up so that we don't have to re-drill a new well or dig a new well. We're actually able to use the existing one with a smaller sleeve on the inside. Does that make sense?
It does, but how long has that been like this?
So mid-2000s is when we think it was taken offline. They actually had some bad testing. Just like David mentioned earlier, all the wells are tested at the actual source. So they actually tested the moment the water comes out of the ground. And this one actually tested positive, I guess, several times for having contaminants in it. So once that happens, they shut the well off and don't allow that water to pump into the system. And then it kind of sat there off and on for a while. Multiple tests were run, and it kind of went on for, I guess, about a year. And then at some point, it was just taken offline. There aren't a lot of records on that. And again, we're talking about, several years ago, before most of us were here. So that it took a little while just to try to dig into some of that information to try to figure out exactly what did happen, why was it taken offline, why didn't they try to fix it, did they try to fix it. A lot of that information just has been lost through the years. But now, based on what we know, we've done enough tests that we think we can bring that well back online. It's a very high yield well. So for us, that's extremely important to know that we're getting a lot of water out of one location. So that's why we've chosen to kind of continue down that path and try to rehab that existing well.
Okay. Last question on this water well. So that solution is better than trying to find a different well spot?
Well,
because it's not making sense to use a contaminated that you know was contaminated and you're going to try to fix it up.
Sure. So whenever we go to try to find new wells, it's really, I guess on our side, it's a gamble every single time. So as a town, and we're operating a well system, those wells have to get around 30 gallons a minute for them to be financially capable of producing enough water for us to financially keep them operational. So if we get anything less than 30 gallons a minute for that well, it really costs more to operate than the water we're getting out of it. Does that make sense on that number? So when we start poking holes in the ground, one, we're having to obtain rights to do that. So we're having to purchase property. Most people won't let you just go drill a well on their property to see if there's water there before they sell it. Before they allow us to drill a 6 to 8 inch hole in the ground, they're going to want to have that property purchased. So now we're having, as a town, to buy property, hoping that we get enough water out of that location to be able to supply the water that we need. And there are a lot of towns that have to do that. So if we need to, then the answer is yes. And we identified several years ago pieces of property that we thought would be ideal. And we try to pick locations that sometimes aren't necessarily close to existing wells, but maybe could produce the same flow that that one does. Or we may have some existing data of a home well that's doing really, really well. And so we would try to use some of that information to help us isolate a better location. But at the end of the day, it's always a guess. So anytime that from a flow standpoint that we have the information that tells us that this well is doing really, really well, we always know that we can treat a lot of stuff coming out of that well. So again, the contamination was coming in from the surface, leaking into the well. If we seal that surface off, then that should seal the contaminant out of that well as well. Now, understand that when a new well is brought online, this one's going to be treated just like a new well because it has not been operational so long. We have to run a multitude of tests. So all the 200 tests that they referred to that they have to run in the system, we have to run a lot of those same tests on a new well when it's done. So understand that it's not that we're just going to bring this well back online and hope it's not contaminated. Before they will allow us to even put it back online and plumb it to the system, we'll have to meet all of those requirements as far as testing goes.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Let me let the moderator.
It's just one question.
Just hang on 1 second. Let's see if somebody else wants to ask a question first. So I want to try to get around it. Yes, ma'am. I'll come back to you though.
Hi, my name is Diane Porter. My address is 102 Ridgeway Drive. I'd also like to include my daughter's address, 409 Corner Pine and Brantley. I've only been a resident here 2.5 years, and I love this town. But I have not drank my water since I've been in my apartment. A lot of the residents in my apartment complex don't drink water out of the faucet either. It's brownish. Now, I know it's been said that the water is not contaminated. It's been well tested. So my question is there something maybe within the pipes where the water runs through in the city that could be causing this discoloration? My daughter's been in her home for 20 years, and her water is terrible. If you go in her bathroom where the water just sits in the toilet stool, it sometimes turns black. And like the residue left on the bathtub, if you take a bath, if you don't wash it right, then let it sit a day or so, you get like a black or really brownish ring. I really get afraid sometimes thinking about it because I said, okay, I'm showering and bathing with this water. Is there something in it, because of the way it looked, that could get into my skin, into my body, and down the road cause me some type of disease or serious illness? So is there anything that can be done about that?
So I hear your concern, and discolored water is oftentimes due to a million different things in the distribution system. A lot of the times it's got to do with rust inside of older iron pipes that are either in the distribution system or could be from the point from the meter at the road to the service going up to the house and the plumbing inside. And I've seen it be caused by all different kinds of things. You know, I've seen places in different towns that have water. You know, one house will be just like you're describing. You know, black looking dots falling out of the water, and that's typically an indication of a certain I say contaminant, but it's it's iron and manganese forming in the water. But for the most part, what's going on is you'll have one house that's like that, and the house on either side of them won't have those issues. And it turns out that you can trace it back to either a piece of galvanized pipe or galvanized piping for services in an older section of town that may have been just rusted and are at the end of their service life and should be replaced with a more modern polypropylene or polyethylene type service, PVC, a modern plastic level service that is won't precipitate those kinds of issues. But rust is always going to discolor water, and it's typically will clear up after some flushing out on the main distribution side of the system. But that doesn't mean that there's not a slug of rust still in the pipe service that's going to still come into the house and possibly ruin some clothes and a washer and a wash of whites or something like that. With that being said, there's no way to get it all out of the system, because until the whole system is made of something that doesn't rust, that there are valves that have no metal in them, that there are hydrants that aren't made of metal, and I haven't seen those yet. You're going to have a routine problem with discolored water, and the way to address it is to call in, tell them that you're having a water quality issue, and they should come and flush the system. Now, that being said, I don't know what the Envirolink standard approach is here, and I won't speak for them. I'll let them what they say when they do that. But that is common everywhere, small town, big town, anywhere, country road, anywhere you look at it, you'll see that happening, and it's something that it takes a while to diagnose and to tease out of a distribution system.
My daughter has been in her home for over 20 years, and she's constantly having this problem until today. She has called the city and asked about it and reported it, and asked if the water was contaminated, because she was also afraid to use it. And supposedly the water is fine, but she's still having this problem. So what would you suggest that she does? Because she's at the residence of 409 Pine and Brantley.
Like Mike said, it's sporadic in the system. As far as the well water coming out of the ground, there's no iron or manganese in that water, so it is contributed to the piping system. As far as the flushing system that we do a systematic flushing at least twice a year. So we start at the well, typically done at night, and we flush out to the boundaries of the town. We flush every fire hydrant in the system, a complete flush of the whole system. We were actually scheduled to do that right as the main water break happened, so we put it off. We didn't want to flush water when the system was recovering, so we're due to do that probably this month or the beginning of next month. I'll have to get with the town and see when they want to schedule it.
I have one other question.
Sure.
How great is the infrastructure of the water lines in Springhill? I mean, is it very old, updated?
So one of the ways that you age a water system is to look at the age of the tank, when the tank was built, when the tanks were built, how old the fire hydrants are in the system. That's because I don't know if you ever pay attention to them like I do, but when you go by a fire hydrant, if you look, it's got the manufacturer and there's a little date stamp on the back of them most of the time. Anyone manufactured after about 1955 has the date cast into the barrel. And so you can tell that hydrant is 1960, 1965. So in the system, there are about 93 hydrants in town. And about 35 of them are 1960, 1975 era. So that puts, what you do is when you see that, you assume that the mains in the ground are roughly that age, the valves in the ground are roughly that age too. State guidelines typically say that anything over 40 years old is past its usable service life. Now, we got cast iron mains in the ground all over the state and all over the country that are functioning fine, and the valves are, functioning okay. They're not necessarily the greatest. You don't have the greatest confidence in them when there's a main break, but you have to rely on them at some point because 20-inch valves, 15-inch valves, those kinds of things are $25,000 a piece to replace just to buy the fittings. So they're very cost prohibitive to replace, especially when they're in service and they're serving a whole town. So with that said, I can't give you the condition of the system because I haven't dug every bit of it up and looked at it. I would say that if you have a large number of water complaints for quality, color, and precipitates out, like the black dots and things in your bathtub, you've got some aging pipes that are showing signs of being past their service life and being able to be replaced if you are going to consider the capital investment in doing it. So once you're hitting a 40-year service life, you're then eligible to apply to the state for grant funding that would replace aging infrastructure, and that's how you approach the application process for those grant funds. So you would document, all right, everything on this street's 70 years old. Here's the map that proves it. Here's the dates on the hydrants, those kinds of things, and you would put a project together that would try and replace that. And so that's the first step in what we're doing. This AIA is meant to sort of become a report that will tell you the system is roughly this old. This pump was replaced 2 years ago, so that's okay, but the valves are still 70 years old, or those sorts of things. And we would prioritize those projects, make recommendations to the town, and the town would vote to either go after funding or fund it through capital reserve that they may have on hand, or rather through rate increases, which are never a popular thing. So it's there's a lot of discussion that has to be made, and like I say, it takes a while to develop all of that scheme of how we're going to go around and do those things. So it's all about working a process and a plan and being patient with trying to get them replaced. But all of the data that we get from water quality issues that you can call in and we can mark as dots on the map that we had water quality issues documented, that Envirolink gets as a work order in their system, help us make the case that we need the funding from the federal government or the state to be able to replace these mains. So it's good information, and we need it all to be able to compile into making a good argument to get that grant. And that's probably, I know dirty water isn't a good thing, but it's probably the silver lining in the fact that, hey, maybe that complaint will help me get the town some money to be able to do that. And that's what we look at when we're putting the applications together.
I guess my biggest worry and last question is that type of water safe? I mean, even so far as bathing, is that anything you can assure me of, or?
Well, certainly as far as bathing, I mean, iron in the water is not anything to be concerned about. It may be, I'm not sure of what the health hazard is with ingesting anything that's got iron manganese in it, but we can certainly try and look that up. But I think a lot of that data is in the data that Ms. Anna's going to make available through her report, because the minimum contaminant levels and what's listed as a minimum contaminant of a contaminant and everything else in the water that's coming out should be able to, there's some health guidelines that you should read and steer clear of. Now, there's a drinking water report that's done for water quality for every municipality that runs a water system, and they publish that data, and they're required to, and should talk about what the levels of any contaminants were found are. So there's a published report that can kind of help you, hey, this is not something to worry about, this is something to worry about, and they haven't had anything that's given them those red flags from what I'm hearing from the state.
I'm still not comfortable drinking it. I drink my bottled water. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Who's next? Come on up.
My name is Eddie Gilchrist, and I live at 536 Woods Mill Road, and I just want to first say thank you for the opportunity to come in and become a little bit better apprised of the situation. I'm going to preface this with something. I hope it doesn't sound like I'm a know-it-all. I'm an ex-environmental engineer. At one time, I reviewed all the groundwater assessment protocols for EPA Region 7. I'm very, very familiar with a lot of the issues of water quality. And if I can just address something that's come up, I think anyone that spends $400 on a 40-inch TV and won't get a Berkey water filter for their house is dumb. Okay, we have a Berkey filter in your house, you ought to filter your water. So, but that aside, my question is this: if the city has what I used to draw up contingency plans. I used to basically say, okay, if we have this level of contaminants so that we have to get rid of this stuff, this is how much it's going to cost us. These are the steps that need to be taken, okay, to do that. We worry about we didn't say how much money can we get, so then what can we do? That's what I think I hear you guys saying. I'm very uncomfortable with that. What I think rather is we ought to have, and I realize engineering studies cost money. I realize that. But we ought to have some kind of general framework for, if we have to jerk everything we've got out of the ground, what's it going to cost? Then we go looking for how we fund that. Okay? And on the other hand, if we've got the main branches, that main cast iron pipes, and maybe we've got, I don't know what the system is like here, but I would be very, very comfortable if the city would say, look, we have 4 or 5 different contingency levels that we'd like to approach, from doing it, you know, tearing the whole thing out to just continuing to do patchwork. And we could share with the community what those potential costs are. Then we could look at a way to fund them for whether that is, you know, God forbid, I moved from Durham and my taxes here are $600 as compared to $3,000 there. I don't want that. I don't. But everything from taxes to use fees to whatever, we can sort of play a more intelligent game, I believe, if we know what it is we are actually looking to fund. Does that make sense? Is that where the city is going? If somebody has a plan, I don't know what it entails.
So, and I don't mean to, you know, interrupt you at all.
No, I'm done.
The capital improvement plan that we talk about, that is the study in the asset management and the AIA that we're working on. We are currently working on that. That will be in the recommendations. We'll do a CIP project that will be over a 10-year schedule, what the plan and the projects will be that we recommend being done. We can certainly put one that is a full-scale, replace everything in the city or in the ground, and new hydrants, new valves, new mains, new services, new meters, new everything. The number will be in the $20 million range.
Right.
You know, and I don't quote me on that, but that is that's probably very low.
And don't hear me saying that I'm advocating doing that.
So what the approach that my firm takes with asset management plans and trying to get people into an asset management mindset, which is you try to extend the service life of what you have in order to keep from having to replace it today, and you put in operation and maintenance, you know, plans that are exercise valves, replace 5 hydrants a year. If you've got 93 hydrants, replace 10 a year, you get them all replaced in 10 years. And chip away at what is the big elephant, you know, to get at it. The approach to replacing 10 valves a year when you have 194 in the system, you look at the oldest ones and you go to that part of the system and replace things. That will be phased and divided up in the city, and trying to look at those. We try to split those numbers up over a 10-year period so that it's a little bit more manageable, but even at $20 million on a 10-year schedule, that's $2 million a year just in today's numbers. That, you know, where's that money going to come from? With 850 users in the system, that's a sizable rate increase or one-time payment every month to be able to get it funded. So with that said, you know, I hear what you're saying. I use the 40-year eligibility to be able to replace funds and do that. It means that the town doesn't have to foot all of that bill. It makes you eligible to be able to get what is recognizable infrastructure funds to be able to do some of these things on a larger scale basis and not have it take 25 years to get 15 hydrants replaced. So with that said, you know, there's a general scope and approach to do that. The AIA becomes the vehicle by which you apply for more of these funds to try and keep water rates low in the town, because you can get grants and long-term low interest debt that will allow you to do some of these things and make the replacements that you need. You know, as you get more development on the outskirts of town and newer subdivisions get built and add on to the system, you know, they're going to be required to put their own water system in that's going to connect to the system. That's new revenue, new users, new capital coming in that will generate revenue to be able to take care of the older part of the system, and that's what you want. Is you want to attract people that are going to build a new system that will be trouble-free for what you hope is forever, but 20, 25 years. So you have 20, 25 years of being able to generate revenue to fix the older part of the system that may get redeveloped or may have interest and have more people coming into town and buying houses and doing infill. So, you know, that approach is difficult, but you know, almost every single town, you know, even the bigger towns that have, you know, millions of people in it are still looking for grant funding so that they can keep water rates where they are, so they don't have to have a spike in rates because they're just never popular. And I hear what you're saying loud and clear about, you know, some kind of fees or working some kind of, but that's part. I hear
am not advocating that.
I know, but you know, that's something we will discuss in the rate study as part of this plan that we'll be finishing by the end of the year to discuss with the town and make public and try and hear the recommendations. You know, now we adopt this and we move forward with that approach.
Okay. One final question. You did say when you submit this, there'll be a public comment period for us to review and.
Well, I will wind up presenting my asset management plan and CIP to the town, and you know, it'll be a public meeting. I have to do that for what we have, and then we'll take recommendations and revise and take into scope. You know, we will have meetings with them to try and guide that CIP into what is prioritized by what the town wishes us to prioritize in. You know, I'm not coming in here and saying, well, you need to replace every valve in town when every valve is in good shape. You know, I'm going to come in here and say, well, what do you want to do? Do we just go through the corridor and change everything on Main Street? Do we do this? And that's going to be based on looking at the map, looking at the assets, looking on what the town needs. You know, a well reinstatement plan may be what needs to be a capital project to do. We don't know. We're getting into that portion of it right now, actually. So
I appreciate you guys' graciousness in allowing us to check.
Thank you. Who's next? Okay.
Megan Howard, 208 East Branch Street. My question is for the gentleman over here and Mr. Kim. Like you were talking about earlier, you said that it's a gamble to find a new well location and it requires property acquisition for the town and you don't know how much water you're going to get for it. I was wondering if you're going to be including in your capital improvement plan the option for a utility merger with Nash County and how that would affect cost and potential improvement for the infrastructure of the town.
Mike has talked so much, I'll take the heat a little bit. So the answer is yes. So the town and Nash County have discussed since 2004 a potential merger with either Nash County or the town of Nashville. So there are multiple ways for us to connect to another system. To date, that has not been something that either side has really pursued very heavily. The last discussions, I think, were maybe somewhere around 2015. I guess right now the town produces enough water to supply the town's needs. And typically when we look at interconnection, there are two reasons. One, we can't meet the water supply the town needs. Or two, we need an emergency connection in case something did happen. So in the event of a water main break, just like we've had, having an additional connection would not have helped that situation because we couldn't isolate the actual main break to stop the water. So ultimately, feeding more water into the system would have been, I guess, worse on us than allowing what happened to happen. So the answer is yes, there will be more discussions. I'm sure to be listed in the CIP how close the Nash County system is. It is closer today than it was the last time we discussed it. But again, that's something that both the Nash County Commissioners and the town of Spring Hope would have to come to some kind of agreement on that water purchase, the water supply, and there's a lot of political factors that are tied into that as well. But the answer to that question is yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? And then you're next.
Hello, my name is Darrell Emig. I live at 504 East Main Street. I'm going to probably ask some questions that have already been asked, but this is my first night at the circus here. Apparently, it's been a couple of other ones. Anyway, number one is, our assumption is that the water towers are generally full, 100%. Is that a true assumption, or does anybody really know how much water is in a water tower?
Well, sir, the towers fluctuate. You know, the tower fills up. Ideally, the towers would fill up, the wells would shut off, and the system that we previously talked about, the SCADA system, would monitor that. So the tower would fill all the way up, the wells would shut off, and it would drain to a certain point. Because you want water to circulate through the water tower. You don't want it to sit there.
I understand. Do we know what that turnover is?
Well, currently the wells are operated on timers. So it pretty much operates, not fully, but 3/4 of the way full down to about 1/4 full. And it operates up and down based on, you know, water demand and the wells filling up the system. But
Okay.
once this new technology is implemented, it'll be a lot closer. It might be 3/4 to a half. But like I said, you obviously you do want turnover in your tower. You don't want water to sit there. So you do want that tower to go up and down and fluctuate the water to the system.
Well, if they're 100% full, are there valves at the bottom of each tower where you can turn off the tower so it doesn't go into the system?
Yes.
Do they work?
Yes.
Why, when there's a break, I understand there's breaks in an old system. We've had 2 outages where we had to wait hours and hours and hours while the towers refilled. Why is that?
Well, the latest one, like I said, the water break happened, we think, between 7 o'clock at night. And it was such a rapid break, by the time we got on site, the tower was already empty. There's nothing we could do about it.
But I understand that was the big one on East National. But it's happened in other times where we had to wait for the towers to refill. So that's what I don't understand. It seems simple to me that if 35% of the valves don't work, but you know the ones that turn off the tower work, you should turn them off, fix the thing, turn it back on, so the rest of us here can take a shower after 3 or 4 hours instead of, 18 hours.
Yes, sir, and we do that. If the break is not so rapid that it drains the tank, it just depends on where in the fluctuation of that tank when the water break occurs. If it's in the half or 1/4 inch full filling the water tower when the break happens, obviously it's going to be very little bit of time for the tower to be empty.
Both towers?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Thank you for that. Yes.
Brad Hobbenstricker, 607 McLean Street. Probably have a couple tiered question here, and I just want to preface this by saying, I am relatively new to Spring Hope. I've lived here since 2018. I actually grew up in Michigan, and so I'm sure a lot of folks have seen over the last 5 years. I actually grew up only 20 minutes away from Flint, Michigan. So water quality and things like that hit very, very close to home for me because my father actually worked in Flint, Michigan for about 30 years. The question that I have is related to just overall maintenance and the protocols that are being gone through. So I actually work in a manufacturing plant. I have a maintenance department that reports to me. And so there's a term in maintenance, they go by acronym, TPM, Total Preventative Maintenance. And what it is actually trying to use statistics or preemptive knowledge to fix problems or detect problems before they occur, before we're being in a reactive maintenance situation. So with all the water problems that Spring Hope has obviously faced over the last few months, can you describe or explain, what was your existing protocol and how has that changed?
We don't typically have that term. We call it trending. A what we call it. So we'll look at, you know, pump run times and well run times and pressures and that kind of stuff. And you can trend, you know, on the chart. I'm sure you're familiar. So you can trend if a pump is running longer over a period of time. It's normally a pump that doesn't fail, you know, work great one day and fail the next. So you look at run times and how it's performing, and you can trend it. So if the pump starts running more than normal, but not producing the same amount of gallons, that's kind of how we approach this preventive maintenance program. We trend the systems. You can't really trend pipe under the ground. It's just due to age, and obviously over age it's going to fail.
So I'm going to follow up a little bit with that. So as the town kind of goes through and understands the different things that happen, there are some things that sound alarms. So that's one of the reasons we began applying for the Aia Grant back in 2015. So understand 6 years ago, and really 10 years ago, we understood that the town system is aging, that there are things that are popping up that we are struggling with, or mechanical components that are running out, that it's time to start upgrading those things. So we have had multiple discussions with multiple different boards to talk about, you know, kind of where we're headed and where the town is going. So again, I mean, these grants kind of start out a long time out and just take a long time to come to fruition. We're talking about 2015, we began applying for what we were actually awarded in 2019. And it's kind of our first step of, we know there's an issue, but we've got to get an inventory, we've got to get a handle on what we have, we've got to get a handle on where we are, and try to get us a point of even where do we start. So we have a lot of data, we have a lot of old data and different things, so what we needed was something fresh and new. And that's what these guys are kind of putting together. And from a technology standpoint, what they're going to provide is something that used to be a bunch of paper maps in a drawer that will now be digital, that anyone that uses the system or has access to the system can begin to look on demand to iPads or computer screens and see exactly everything in the system, can move around, can list different things. So understand that the alarm was sounded and we kind of knew what was going on. And right now what's kind of happening is we're trying to play a little bit of catch up. Again, 2015, we knew there was an issue. We began a process, and it's just before that process was able to be finished, we've hit 2021, and we just had some really bad luck this year with a lot of stuff. So there were several alarms that did sound. And again, I mean, there are some maintenance things that are done daily as far as looking at different components of the system to help us kind of see where we are. But we did realize several years ago that this was kind of where we were headed.
Okay. And one follow-up question, I guess, for Envirolink. Have any additional headcount employees been added since any of these water main breaks have taken place, and/or have you reallocated additional people to prioritize that versus maybe other aspects of the city's maintenance plan?
And we have 3 maintenance teams, so we're always hiring people. Could be a difficult process since COVID hit, but we're always adding people in additional teams. Currently, we don't see expanding, going from 3 teams to 16. That's currently the 3 maintenance teams that we have are fully staffed.
Okay, and as far as their allocation, they're allocated to the same kind of tasks generally, or they cover everything?
No, the maintenance team only focuses on maintenance, so they just go out and fix stuff. They don't really get into operation of the water system. That's where that state certified guy has to do that. The maintenance guy can't do that. So, our maintenance team, that's all they do is focus on maintenance.
Is there a backup person in place for that? I keep hearing this one guy, right? What if this one guy hits the lottery or gets hit by a bus tomorrow?
No, there's not one guy. There's 3 teams of 3. There's not one guy. There's 9 people.
All right. That's the end of my question.
Thank you. Who's next? Who's next? Anybody that hadn't been want to speak? Okay. I want to make sure I get everybody that wants to speak an opportunity before I start over.
Hello, my name is Robin Cortonic, and I live out in the county. And some folks don't think that I should be concerned about the city water system, but as a member of the community, I think everyone should be concerned about the water. And the longer y'all have talked, the more my questions have been answered. For instance, the acronym that you used for the assessment management plan. What is that, AIP?
Asset inventory assessment.
Okay. So what has been the bottleneck since 2015 whenever you started that plan? Or has there been more than one plan? If you started in 2015 and we're in 2021, what has been the bottleneck?
So what he meant, the program, the funding program began in 2015 at the state level. And they applied for it beginning in 2015. It's a very competitive process. Every town in the state that runs a utility is able to apply for it. As long as you meet certain criteria, you're eligible to apply for those funds to get those grants. So, I mean, the last round that we put applications in for, that Spring Hope was awarded, we put 10 applications in for 10 different utilities, water and sewer for different towns, and Spring Hope scored the best and was awarded them. It's in this past round, and you just continually are working the application to improve, grab one more point. It's a scoring point. So when they first began the program, it was new. We had a criteria for what everybody was going to be scored on. I can't speak to those older applications. The first application that I worked on with the town was the one we were able to get awarded, so we were very lucky in that respect.
So it's been continuous.
They have applied over and over again, and this 2019 was the round in which we applied that we got the grant funding. So we're going through the process of the engineering services that grant allowed the town to purchase as part of that grant funding.
Okay. But there's been continuous improvement since 2015, or just kind of stopped from 15 to 19?
Well, I can only speak to the application I turned in. I didn't see the old ones, but it was applications turned in every year that in a competitive round, just finally we were granted the application and the grant.
So could you grade the system overall, not sectors in town? Do you think there's going to be an implosion where it's not just an anomaly? Or is that a crystal ball you don't have the answer to?
So well, part of that process in the evaluation is to give an overall general score of everything. And I can tell you that based on the age of and I'm doing water and sewer, but two different reports. But if we're just talking about water, we're talking about age of the system, and just based on all of the documents and everything we've got, what we've gone through and shot, the condition of things we've seen. We're going to score it, based on the age of those hydrants, with a third of them being at least 50 to 70 years old. That's going to put you in the fair to poor range, so that it brings a focus to what needs to be done in the system in different parts of the town and aging it. And so I wouldn't say that that's based on me taking water quality tests or anything like that. That's based on the actual age and condition of the infrastructure. Now, I don't see that those hydrants aren't working. They're not bagged and out of service or anything. They are, for all intents and purposes, functioning hydrants. But when they get to a certain age, it's where you need to begin to think about replacing them.
Like the replacement hip that I need?
That's right. When you get to that certain age, your hip tells you when you got to replace it. You don't want to go and try and hook to a hydrant and find that it doesn't work, and you got a house burning, just down the street. And so, we try to put hey, let's exercise them, let's test them, let's see what can work, and go from there.
So how would you grade it, or could you grade it?
I can't.
You can't grade
right now. I'm not done with the report yet, so I can't.
But it will be by the end of the year.
That's what we intend to do. And certainly with the recent emphasis on everything, that's what we plan to do.
And this could be in your plan, but what do you think is Spring Hope's greatest strength with the infrastructure? The greatest weakness? I think you touched on some of this. Our opportunities? and our strengths, or excuse me, our threats.
This is fantastic. I'm gonna make this up as I go, okay? So, I think right now, the greatest asset the town has, we, one, have been awarded the grant for the AIA, which again, for engineers is information. So it's really, it's a lot like diagnosing a disease or diagnosing a car that needs to be fixed. We need the information to know what to do. So right now, our greatest asset is the fact that Mike Tolson, his firm, those guys are working on this asset inventory. We're going to have a ton of information when it's done. It's going to give us the ability to apply for a lot more grants. It's going to give us the ability to score better when we actually do apply for the grants. So right now, I think knowing there's a concern, knowing how we're moving forward, this AIA study is going to be our greatest asset and our greatest strength. Not necessarily infrastructure strength, but we're headed that direction. So that's going to get us, that's right. Information is huge when it comes to trying to fix or correct any issue. So it's no different than brown water in the houses. I mean, if we can figure out where it's coming from, then we can begin to solve it. But until we can figure out where it's coming from, what's causing it, how it's getting there, it's really difficult to try to figure out how to solve the problem. So right now, I'm going to say that's probably our greatest strength. And I mean, I think our weakness is pretty obvious. I mean, age is our weakness. Age and money. So at the end of the day, if we had more money than we knew what to do with, we wouldn't have an issue with age in the system. So I mean, I think there has always been a struggle of elected officials that sit on this board and make sure that they are being good stewards of the town's tax revenue, the utility revenues that come in. And I think everyone wants to make sure that we're keeping rates low and affordable, but yet trying to continue to operate a system. And I'm not saying that anyone should have made a different decision, because that's a tough decision to make when you're talking about rate increases, especially through some of the times that we've had. But I think it's just one of those things where you get to a point where you got to make the decision to say, guys, we've got a system that's failing, it's time to move forward, and this is what we need to do to get there. So I think infrastructure is going to be our greatest weakness. And I mean, again, opportunities, we can certainly improve the system. The moment we get the AIA grant, we have a ton of opportunities to be able to now apply for other grants to help keep our utility rates low, to help offset some of these costs as far as improvements. And once we have the study, we have the information, we can now begin to plan the different projects that we want to do. And just like Mike said, I mean, we're trying to eat off a big elephant. So being able to take it off in small chunks is going to be a lot easier to manage than trying to tackle the whole thing at one time. So I hope some of that answered some of your questions.
And then the last thing is, I think I understood that if you have an issue with the water, like this lady has for her daughter for 20 years, that she needs to call the town and document, and that's a dot on the map. Because then they're going to send Envirolink out, and Envirolink's going to investigate. Is that right? Did I understand that correctly?
That's, I mean, any workplace that you have, should be able to be tracked in the CMMS system that Envirolink uses. And what we'll do as part of our process in the map is we'll have a layer in our map that will have water complaints since 2019, 2021, water main breaks. I've just got to get that list of those things and get them documented. The first steps in what we were doing was going around town and physically locating all of the assets in town. Now we can start to kind of overlay all that data and sort of tie everything together and say, well, you had nine water leaks on this section of Maine in 10 years. We need to make that a priority and replace that line. You see that a lot in towns that have a lot of 2-inch water main in place, and it's a lot of older galvanized line, and there's a water main break here and at the next joint and at the next joint, and they've spent as much money in repairing it as they would have with them replacing it, but they just didn't have all that data in one place to look at right there to say, oh, we fixed that line 25 times in the past.
So then the brackish water should be, the city should be, or the town should be notified of the brackish water, so that can be a dot on the map?
When you have a water quality complaint, you should always call
Okay, so then everybody in Spring Hope ought to call the town and say.
Maybe not do it tomorrow morning, but when you do see it, and it will, it will. I'm sorry, whoever at town hall is going to get those calls tomorrow, but the truth of the matter is, yes, ma'am, that's data points, and it's data points that need to filter through the system, and it's all data that we try to corral.
Thank you very much. Thanks.
Who else has not spoken that would like to speak? You have not spoken. There's nobody sitting out there that has not spoken that wants to speak.
There's a man right there.
Hey, I see you out there now. You're standing in front of the fireplace. Come on up. Come on up.
Thank you, Lou. Kyle Pritchard, 211 East Nash Street, and I'll keep it really simple. I've just got a quick question for the panel, and by show of hands, if I can ask my question by show of hands, and if any of the elected officials would like to show their hand as well. How many of you have Spring Hope's water quality and infrastructure at the top of your priorities list? Some of you. Yeah. Okay. And then I'd also like to ask the citizens in town, how many of you are grateful that this many people are putting this much effort into trying to help the town with its water quality and infrastructure problems? Thank y'all.
Now, anybody else that hasn't spoken? We're starting over. If you have spoken and you'd like to speak, and we'll go right back to where I started from.
I got 4 questions.
Oh, sorry. She beat you. Mom beat you.
So, in listening to you all speak, especially you two gentlemen, I get the impression that you have dealt with other municipalities in similar circumstances. So obviously, and if I'm not mistaken, Envirolink also covers other municipalities. So obviously for us, this has been rather catastrophic. Are we an anomaly as far as the town goes and our water infrastructure? I mean, are we just completely out in left field compared to other towns our size?
Absolutely not. Every town deals now. You've had a streak of breaks that's a little bit on the high side for sure, and I know very uncomfortable to deal with for a lot of people. I would say that every town that I deal with that has a water leak struggles with finding the valves to isolate to find the valves, to isolate the valves, and it normally points to, well, we need to do a better job of this, exercising valves, or doing this or doing that, so that the next time we can map them better. We can, I couldn't find that valve because it was buried under a bush, or somebody's planted a mailbox right next to it, and I can't see it. That being said, there's a lot of why we went with high accuracy GPS location of all the assets, so that you can literally have your phone guide you to that asset to turn that valve off, and that's a tool to put in the hands of the people who operate the system. It's leveraging a technology that will do that. So I will say you're not an anomaly in the amount of leaks that you're having, and as wet as the winter was, when the ground starts thawing, that's when the leaks pop up, and that's probably all in that time frame that just any operator is going to have seen leaks pop up. It's just unfortunate that it happens to be, a 2 or 3 day shut off when it happens to be that case, and that's unfortunate. But there are lessons to learn to go from there and do better on the next round. And I think that's what I've heard the town express a really interest in trying to do better, get better at this, and do this thing. And we're really going to point the AIA's information that we're doing towards making all of that, learning from those issues and trying to make it into a better system. But from an anomaly standpoint, no, absolutely not. I mean, it's just, depends on what size the mains are. That I've seen 24-inch mains break after a freeze and, flood an entire downtown. And, that was a real mess, and it happened at 2 o'clock in the morning. They always seem to want to happen at the most inconvenient times, but for everybody, it's a different inconvenience. So, you're certainly not an anomaly, but the using this technology to do what we're doing is a step in the right direction for sure, and we just have to use the tools that we're working to develop. So
you had mentioned that about 60 to 70% of our valves should be in working order, would be a fair estimation. How many of those valves are accessible?
Well, we could locate all of them, 100% of them. Now, accessible meaning covered up by something, or now we didn't pop lids to see if there was sand in them or anything like that. But in an event of an emergency, you get out there and you shovel them out and jam the wrench on them and try and turn them either way. But with that said, I don't know that any of them are inaccessible. If I found 194, I found 194 of them were accessible. If there's 20 more out there, those were the inaccessible ones, and I don't know of. We found every one that we were looking for on the older maps that we were using to guide our survey. So, I may have a couple more to find here and there that we need to look for, but if they aren't found, we have a note on there that they weren't GPS located, but I didn't notice that on any of the maps as I was reviewing the data and getting ready for this meeting.
Thank you very much.
Gentleman right here, I'm gonna come here, then I'm coming back. I'm family and everybody else.
So you say we were awarded the grant. What date was that we were awarded the grant? That this process started?
So you apply, and it's called a 2019 Aia Grant. You apply September 30th is the deadline for that. Okay. You wait about 6 months and then you find out whether you get it or not. So April of 2020, we were notified that the town was chosen. And then you go through a procurement process where you're picking the engineer, you're going through that process of getting the contracts with the state and everything so that they'll release the funds. So we started locating the water first back in, I want to say it was June of 2020, and now we had some issues dealing with COVID and everything else with just trying to stay safe and quarantine. I've got a small surveying office, but we came and got what we could when we could do it, but it was hit or miss with being able to cover at the office and do those sorts of things. So it's a gradual pickup of data as we can do it. But with that said, we just wrapped up doing all of the manhole assessments in town, going through town and popping all the lids on the manholes. I've got about 15 or 20 left to come back and score myself because our crew couldn't find them. So that part of the field collection or data collection has just been wrapped up in the past month. And so we're actually trying to find a couple of documents and photos of some lift stations and things like that. And then the next step will be going through and serial numbers, photos, pump models, all those sorts of things on everything. So we're going through that. But from the date you get the grant, you normally have about 3 years to do all the work. We have a schedule of about 2 years that we provided to the town to be able to do all this work. And so when we're finished at the end of this year, about a year and a half of that 2 years is where we're hoping to be.
Well, what date? Do you got a date? You got a date. What I hear right now, everything is riding on you. Everything is riding on your organization. To be honest with you, Jay says the town wants to start, and we're all waiting on you. I'm not trying to, but I've been in construction business, and soon. We're going to do it at the end of this time. Or what date are you going to provide the report to the town?
I will provide the date, the report to the town per the schedule we gave them, and I can't tell you that date off the top of my head. It was 2 years from June of 2020 , so June of 2022. Okay, and that's what we are attempting to do.
Well, there again, attempting. So it could be January, it could be February. It seems if you never put a date on something, it just keeps.
Sure. Well, I didn't know I would be here tonight until Monday.
Well, I'm glad you're here.
I will say that I can't tell you with any certainty when I'll have that 70 or 80 page document written, but I will. It is on the top of my priority list, just like the gentleman just asked a minute ago, and I raised my hand. It is now on the top of our priority list because it is clear that the town has emergencies that they need to address and want to get after, and so we will approach it from that standpoint. So that's my purpose.
Were you were trying to get in front of your son or something?
I gave up on that a long time.
All right, come on.
I have 3 questions and then I'll be quiet. You said that the town now is looking for, or it's buying land to roll the dice to see if there's enough water there. It's for a well. Is the town looking for farther out spots in unowned land or very cheap land for expansions of the water system? Is it finding places where you can drill in, you can find the water, and you don't have to do anything until you need it, until you need the water lines out there, or more homes start to form around there, and you need that as the well system there.
Right. So, as far as properties that the town has looked at, none of them have been acquired or really pursued very far from an initial study of this makes good sense. So typically we want to locate wells very close to existing water lines. We just don't want to get into going outside the town limits with the well and then have to pump it back into town. So anytime that we can keep it close to an existing water line, that would be ideal for the town. As far as doing anything outside the existing water system, the answer is no. So most towns, most municipalities extend their water system through development growth. So as new subdivisions come into town, as the new Bojangles comes into town, they actually extend and expand that water system for the town at no cost. So the town will actually be able to, once Bojangles, because everyone can see it under construction, once that water system is finished, that water system is then donated to the town, and the town owns and operates it from that point forward, but then collects the water bill and sewer bill from that user. So typically the town doesn't do a lot of expansion unless we're trying to get into, trying to entice industries to come into town. Then the town will pursue trying to extend water and utilities out to an industrial site. But for typical commercial residential, that is 100% based on the developer actually expanding that water system, and then the town will operate it once it's done. So.
My second question is there, obviously I don't know how the taxes work or how, if there's an opt-in system or whatever, is there a way of opting in to, you raise your taxes by X amount and you are able to put all of that money you get into a savings for 40 to 50 years later when the water system needs to be replaced again, when this happens 50 years from now? Is there a savings being placed in now where, you won't have to worry about collecting funds or getting grants? You can just be like, we just need the time to people. Is there a way, are there savings, is there money being saved up for the next 50 years?
I wish the answer to that question was yes, but it's not. But it's a great thought and something that I think every town strives to do. So ultimately, the state requires each town to be solvent and make sure that whatever expenditures they spend on the water system, that they're collecting the revenues to support it. Now, the water rates and sewer rates should be high enough to not only operate the water system, but do exactly what you say and essentially build up that fund so that when things do happen, there is money in reserve to be able to go and pull those monies from. Unfortunately, I think for a large majority of towns in North Carolina, that's just not a reality. It's just always that struggle, just like I talked about before, of how much do I raise rates, how much do I increase utility rates, and it's easier if you have a project because people can rally behind a project and they understand, but just to raise rates and you keep building up a fund, tends to go a little negative when it comes to the public. But no, it's a great thought. It would be a great thing to do. As engineers, I think we tell the town almost every year, guys, you need to be saving up money. This is going to happen. You're going to run out. Things are going to break. So the town does have money in the budget. I think there's $70,000 budgeted for repairs. So there's money in there for repairs. But obviously, if we have major issues, it's not set up to completely build us a brand new wastewater treatment plant when it's time.
Yeah. All right. And my third question is there anything that we civilians can do to put less stress on the system? Like besides, just obviously turn off the faucet. Is there anything, that we may not know or, we may be oblivious to that would stop, that would stop so much stress being on the system?
You're on point. You have asked a lot of good questions. So the short answer is, on the sewer side, I can give you 10,000 things that you shouldn't be doing that you do that mess up a sewer system. But on the water side, there really isn't a whole lot that you can do as the user. we as a town are required to protect our system from, I guess, you being able to contaminate us. There are check valves on the meters. Commercial sites have to have backflow preventers that don't allow water to come back from their system back into the main system. So there are a lot of checks and balances in place for us to protect the water supply, because at the end of the day, the last thing we need is some industry polluting our water supply because they're back feeding into us. So there are a lot of things in place that protect us from that. So on your side of it, the answer is really no. You're doing exactly what you need to be doing, which is voicing, your concerns and your opinions. And it helps the commissioners make decisions on how to move forward with money and how to move forward with priorities of projects. Understand that these commissioners are dealing with not only a water system. They're having to deal with water, sewer, drainage, sidewalks, wastewater treatment plants. There are a lot of different pools for resources. So when you're a small town and you have a finite amount of resources that you're trying to spread out, and believe me, for everyone that's concerned about the water, there's someone concerned about sidewalks or someone complaining about their street. So all those things their strings are pulled in a lot of different directions. But to answer your question on the water system, there really isn't a lot that you can do on your side. You can conserve water when we have those notices out. But as far as the water system's infrastructure itself, there's very little that you could do.
All right. Thank you again.
Yep.
Anybody else like to voice an opinion or ask a question?
Over here.
Oh, no, you've already, no. Go ahead.
I don't have a question. I have a statement basically for the town and for Envirolink. When we had the 3-day water break, part of the problem was the communication to this town. We got these Facebook notices, and they were updated maybe at every 4 hours. Nobody realized that you had to empty both tanks. That could have been mentioned in a message. And then there were pictures taken all over town of the manhole covers left off. One of the Envirolink employees personally told me that part of the problem was at the end, one of the towers had forgotten to be turned on, whatever that means. So the lack of communication at that time, as catastrophic as this was, would have alleviated a lot of people's anxiety and a lot of people's anger. And I think that's kind of what started a big part of this. So this town needs to know more about what's going on when things like this happen. And I finger point at Envirolink all the time, because I really think that the lack of maintenance and the lack of communication, I had a guy stop his truck in my front yard. He's in there, he can't even back up. So, the quality of your employees don't impress me at all. So, but I do think that if the town and Envirolink can communicate in a better way to the citizens, it might alleviate a lot of people's anxiety when things like this happen. If we know exactly that tower is empty, and we have to wait exactly for it to fill up. And I think a lot of people didn't realize that. So I think we need to learn to communicate what's going on in more specifics so that we can get through some of this stuff in the future.
If you don't mind, I'd like to address it a little bit. So I will say there have been a lot of conversations since the past issue of just how we could have done better. So one of the things is the communication piece of it. One of the problems that we struggle with was our phone tree system takes around 6 hours to get through all the numbers in town. So really what was happening is by the time new information was coming out, it was almost obsolete. So that's one of the issues that we've had, that we've now contacted Nash County Emergency Services. We're going to try to work with those guys. Their phone tree system's a lot faster.
But people have to sign up for that code, right?
We can sign you up through the town. So and what would happen is it would be a town call says this is what we need, and that phone tree system is much faster than ours. So that's one thing that we have looked into just to try to communicate better and understand. It's easy to look back and say we should have done this, this, and this, and that's really what the town is doing. Another thing that was a huge concern is water. At the last meeting, you guys had kind of expressed it would have been nice if water could have been provided. So the town has looked into how to bring bladders in, almost like a swimming pool to fill up. So that's one option. We've looked at tanker trucks that we can potentially have on call that when we need them, they're able to respond within a certain amount of time. So, I mean, understand there were a lot of things. I think this is the first time the town really had to deal with it. And so what we needed was a plan, and there really wasn't a great plan in place. But now we understand what needs to be done, and the town has really had a lot of conversations. When we need them, they're able to respond within a certain. When do we implement it? When does it go into place? So I want everyone to kind of understand that the town's trying to get better.
Water break, I mean, for any kind of catastrophe or emergency.
That's right.
There didn't seem to be a plan at all.
And we have a lot of plans for lift stations going down. We have a lot of plans for wastewater treatment plant failure. We have a lot of plans in place as a town. That was one we didn't have. And so it was one that by far was needed. And like I said, now we've got a plan in place. We kind of have procedures and protocols. This is what happens. This is when triggers, and this is who we call.
But Facebook is a good way to communicate with a portion of the community quickly.
Sure. Yeah.
But not everybody in town uses a computer.
That's right.
Came up in the last.
And I think
the red thing is a good idea.
Look, we could have all communicated better. I think through the process. And like I said, now that we kind of know, I mean, we can start. Someone has to own every task that gets done. And Envirolink, I don't want to defend them or take up for them or attack them. Okay, I mean, but at the end of the day, their job wasn't to try to keep the residents up to date. It was really to try to fix it. That's right. But the town's job was to communicate with you guys and try to keep what was going on. And like I said, I think there was just some opportunities that have been missed. And now, like I said, we're able to kind of work with Nash County to help us with a system that was really not set up to do what we were trying to do with it. Does that make sense?
I don't think they've used Code Red once before, because there's been several times where I've signed up for it.
Right.
Like for some tornado things and things like that have come through.
That's right.
So it's a good thing.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Looks like we're getting to the end. Got one more? Have you spoken?
I have.
And she has so you come right on up here and stand behind her and you got that.
I just had a follow-up question for Manager Kim. Do you have a citizen advisory board that partakes in water quality, or would you be interested in developing one so citizens could be more involved?
We don't have a per se water quality advisory board. We do have other advisory boards with the town. We do have the planning board and the downtown development board. We also have a board of adjustment. That was for the board of adjustment. We have one vacancy, which again we have to find somebody that lives in the ETJ in the extraterritorial jurisdiction to fill that position. But as far as a new advisory board, that would be something that the board of commissioners would have to create. That's something that I could discuss with them and see what their thoughts are about that. But there's other ways to other than having a new advisory board, to have your input and reaching out to the town and making certain suggestions.
Right. I would really appreciate it if the board would consider adding into the bylaws for the planning board to include water quality and infrastructure in the town, rather than creating a whole new advisory board. That might be something to consider. That's all that I have.
Thank you.
One quick suggestion, something that was mentioned is that there really is nothing that individual citizens can do to alleviate the stress on water. There is stuff that you can do to alleviate the stress on the sewage. I would take a little bit of issue with that. One of the things that I don't like about any municipality is being locked in to using your water. Okay? Before we had municipal water here, every house here had well. Every single house did. And I understand there are issues with backflow, there are issues with protecting, and I also understand that there are issues regarding revenue, because you measure how much you charge by how much money goes in to maintain the sewer. If we've got money going out, water going out that's not, you can't measure it going in, there's a problem. I would love to be able to uncap the well in my house. I know right where it is. I could do it cheaper than you could do it. I could pay someone to do it cheaper. There are lots of private citizens that would love to do that. I really think that we should make a priority of allowing citizens to fix their own problems, if we can, and try to work within that. If you want some suggestions from me, I'll be happy to give them. But that's just a general thing that I'd like to see occur, to allow us to actually take part in fixing helping fix the problem for ourselves, or at least see us as assets in that. That's all.
Okay, we've approached the 9 o'clock hour. Everybody okay? And we'll go back here to our distinguished guests and see if any of them would like to have any kind of comments. Not obligated to. If you'd like to, you can. Somebody start waving that red flag.
I'm going to turn this so I can address a little disrespect to all of you. I'm James Gilly. I represent you in North Carolina House District 25, all of Nash County mostly, and so Spring Hope, thank you for inviting us tonight. I want to honor your time, so I know it's late. What I will say to you is that this is not a new conversation. I met with your town back in March. We started talking about infrastructure. We recognize that infrastructure is a huge issue. It's not, someone asked this question, it's not limited to Spring Hope. This is a national issue. You hear federally conversation around $100 billion in infrastructure. In North Carolina, 100,000 people are added to our state every year. That's almost the size of like Wilmington. And if you start thinking about Raleigh, you know, you can't go anywhere in Cary, Wake Forest, Roseville, you know, now East Wake County is kind of backing up with Nightdale and Zebulon and Wendell. Hey, the next big hot spot, in my opinion, is going to be Spring Hope. So we got to have infrastructure. And the state recognizes that. I think we're working hard in the state because it's going to take federal money, state money, grant money, public-private partnerships, and individual homeowners kind of coming together to figure out a solution. So all I want you to hear from me is we are here to be a part of the solution. I'm delighted to represent you. If you have questions around grant opportunities, I want to work with you. And thank y'all all for caring enough to be here tonight. And thank you for all the panelists for being here tonight.
Good evening, I'm Lisa Barnes. I represent Spring Hope, Nash County, in the North Carolina Senate. So I'm happy to be here tonight. Thank you for having me. Thank you, Town of Spring Hope, for organizing this meeting so that you, the citizens, are able to share your concerns. I know it's frustrating when you don't have water and you're without water and have low pressure and have all these issues, but I will say that it is all in God's timing, because if y'all didn't have these problems these last few weeks, I wouldn't have been able to submit a request for the budget, and I was able to do that on behalf of the town. And I just found out yesterday that the town will be receiving $3.7 million appropriation for your water and sewer issues. So. Thanks for all of you guys who reached out to me. And Whitley Daniels, I think you were the first one that reached out to me and said, we're having a problem here in Spring Hope. So I said, get me some numbers so that I can get it into the budget before the deadline. So thank you all. And if you ever need anything, please don't hesitate to reach out to my office or me at any time.
Okay. Kim? I'm going to let you close it out.
Again, I just want to thank everyone for coming this evening. And again, just a reminder that, again, when you do have water quality issues or even sewer issues or any issues in general, please contact the town hall. You have multiple ways to do that. You can message us on Facebook through Messenger. You can also come by. I have an open door policy to speak with anyone anytime. You can email and also call town hall. Thank you.